She was stripped of her title bound in iron and traded for 3 sacks of silver. Her own father called her a defective runt, but the terrifying Alpha King who bought her didn't see a broken girl. He saw the most powerful weapon his kingdom had ever known. The damp, unforgiving stone floor of Oakhaven Keep seeped the bitter chill of late autumn directly into Victoria's bare knees. She kept her head bowed, her tangled auburn hair acting as a meagre veil against the hundreds of staring, predatory eyes. Around her, the great hall buzzed with the intoxicating scents of roasted boar, heavily spiced wine, and the cruel metallic tang of shifting loyalties. In the year 1243, in the heart of the Western Valleys, a wolf who could not shift was worse than dead. She was a liability, and Victoria Redfern, the firstborn daughter of Lord Elijah, was the most famous liability in the realm. At 21 years old, she had never heard the call of the moon. She possessed no heightened senses, no supernatural strength, and no inner wolf. To the Oakhaven pack, a lineage known for producing brutal, towering warriors, she was a cosmic joke. "Stand up, girl. Let them see what they are purchasing," Lord Elijah's voice boomed, echoing against the vaulted ceilings. There was no paternal warmth in his tone. Only the cold, calculating inflection of a merchant selling damaged goods. Victoria struggled to her feet, the heavy iron shackles around her wrists, clinking in the sudden silence. Beside her father stood her stepmother, Lady Beatrice draped in opulent velvet, a smirk playing on her painted lips. Next to Beatrice was Vivienne, Victoria's younger half-sister. Vivienne was everything. Victoria was not blonde, vicious an early shifter, and the newly appointed heir to the Oakhaven territory. "We start the bidding at 20 copper pieces," cried the pack's auctioneer, a greasy man named Fowler. "She is a defect, yes, but her hips are wide, and she is of pure blood. She can clean, she can cook, and she can warm a bed." Laughter erupted from the surrounding tables. Victoria closed her eyes, biting the inside of her cheek, so hard she tasted copper. This was not merely an auction, it was a public execution of her dignity. Her father had accrued a massive debt to the neighbouring Highland clans, and rather than sell off his prized lands, he had decided to liquidate his greatest shame. 30 coppers, shouted a burly, scarred rogue from the back. "A silver piece," countered Lord Harrington. Victoria shuddered. Harrington was the alpha of the Mirkwood clan, a man 3 times her age, with a reputation for returning his omegas in wooden boxes. His rheumy eyes traced the outline of her shivering frame with sickening hunger. 2 silver pieces. 3 sacks of silver. Harrington bellowed, standing up and slamming his fist on the oak table. The room went dead silent. 3 sacks of silver was an exorbitant amount for a wolfless girl. It was the price of a small estate. Elijah's eyes widened with greedy delight. 3 sacks of silver from Lord Harrington. Going on boom! The massive iron-reinforced oak doors of the great hall did not just open, they were violently blown off their hinges. A blinding swirl of freezing snow and gale-force wind ripped into the hall instantly, extinguishing the torches and plunging the room into chaotic flickering shadows. The low, rumbling growls of 100 Oakhaven warriors vibrated through the floorboards, but they were immediately silenced by a suffocating, crushing aura. The air pressure in the room dropped so rapidly that Victoria gasped for breath. This was Alpha Command, but not just any Alpha. This was ancient, terrifying power. Out of the blinding snow stepped a vanguard of heavily armored warriors wearing the crest of the dire wolf, and parting them like the Red Sea was King Kevin of Winterbourne. Known across the continent as the Beast of the North, Kevin was a legend whispered to frighten pups into obedience. He was a conqueror, a man who had united the savage ice packs through sheer, unadulterated strength. He stood 6 feet and 5 inches tall, wrapped in a massive mantle of black fur, his armor forged from dark steel. A jagged scar ran from his temple down to his jaw, a testament to a war fought and won long ago. His eyes, a piercing glacial blue, swept the room with absolute disdain. "Who dares intrude on Oakhaven business?" Elijah demanded, though his voice trembled, betraying his terror. King Kevin did not look at Elijah. His piercing gaze locked directly onto Victoria, who stood trembling on the auction block. The moment his eyes met hers, a strange electric jolt shot down her spine. For the first time in her life, the empty void in her chest, where a wolf should have been, fluttered. "I am not here to intrude." Kevin's voice was like grinding stones, deep and resonating in the marrow of every wolf present. "I am here to bid." He snapped his fingers. One of his massive guards stepped forward and threw a heavy iron-bound chest at Elijah's feet. The latch shattered upon impact, spilling hundreds of raw, uncut gold ingots across the stone floor. The wealth was unfathomable. It was enough to buy Oakhaven 3 times over. 50 pounds of raw northern gold. Kevin stated, his eyes never leaving Victoria. "For her," Harrington sputtered, stepping back. Elijah's jaw went slack. Lady Beatrice let out a soft, terrified gasp. "Your Grace," Elijah stammered, dropping to one knee, completely forgetting his pride. "The gold is more than generous, but you must know she is broken. She has no wolf. She is utterly useless." King Kevin finally tore his gaze away from Victoria to look down at her father. The sheer disgust in his expression made Elijah flinch. "The only useless things in this room, Lord Elijah, are the fools who throw away a diamond because it is covered in dirt," Kevin said coldly. He walked up the wooden steps of the auction block. The crowd shrank back. He stopped right in front of Victoria. Up close, he smelled of pine needles, wood smoke, and crisp winter air. He reached out not to grab her hair or her waist, but to grip the heavy iron chains binding her wrists. With a sharp metallic crack, he snapped the solid iron with his bare hands. Victoria rubbed her bruised wrists, looking up at him in shock. "Come," he said softly, a stark contrast to the roar of his public voice. She didn't look back at her father. She didn't look at her sister. She stepped down from the block and followed the Alpha King out into the raging blizzard, leaving her old pathetic life behind in the ashes. The journey north to Winterbourne took 3 grueling weeks. Victoria spent the first few days waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had been bought by a warlord. She expected to be thrown into a dungeon or worse, forced into a harem. But King Kevin subverted every dark expectation. He rode his massive black destrier beside her carriage during the day, guarding it personally. At night, when they camped in the freezing alpine passes, he did not summon her to his tent. Instead, he ordered his men to construct a heated pavilion just for her, ensuring she was fed hot stews and wrapped in the finest woolen blankets. He treated her not as property, but as a dignitary. It confused her. It terrified her. On the 21st day, the jagged obsidian spires of Winterbourne Keep pierced the grey sky. Built into the side of a colossal mountain, the fortress was a marvel of medieval engineering. Unlike the vain tapestry-draped halls of Oakhaven, Winterbourne was stark, functional, and undeniably beautiful in its raw strength. As soon as they arrived in the bustling courtyard, Kevin handed his reins to a stablemaster and turned to Victoria, who was awkwardly stepping down from the carriage. "Welcome to Winterbourne, Victoria," Kevin said. It was the first time a man of power had used her actual name, rather than calling her runt or girl. "Why am I here, Your Grace?" she finally asked, her voice raspy from disuse. "Why spend a fortune on a defect?" Kevin studied her face, his icy eyes softening slightly. "You will be seen by Maeve, our chief healer. We will speak after she has examined you." "An examination?" Victoria's heart sank. This was it. The moment they realized she was truly empty inside, that they had wasted their gold. She was escorted into a warm, brightly lit stone chamber, smelling intensely of crushed herbs and boiling water. Maeve, a stern but kind-eyed older woman with silver hair braided down her back, greeted her. "Sit, child," Maeve instructed, pointing to an examination table. "The king has asked for a full diagnostic of your blood and spirit. Do not fear. No harm will come to you here." Victoria sat, allowing Maeve to draw a small vial of blood from her arm. For the next hour, Maeve chanted ancient northern rites over the blood, dropping various metallic powders and crushed leaves into the vial. Suddenly the mixture hissed violently, turning a vile, bubbling black. Maeve gasped, stepping back from the table. She looked at Victoria with a mixture of profound horror and deep pity. "What?" Victoria whispered, her chest tightening. "What is it? Am I dying?" Before Maeve could answer, the heavy wooden door opened, and King Kevin stepped in. He took one look at the bubbling black vial, and his jaw tightened so fiercely a muscle ticked in his cheek. "As I suspected," Kevin growled, his voice vibrating with a barely contained murderous rage. "Your Grace, she is completely saturated," Maeve said, her voice shaking. "It's a miracle she can even stand upright. The toxicity levels would have killed a lesser wolf years ago." Victoria looked frantically between the two of them. "Toxicity? What are you talking about?" Kevin walked over, kneeling in front of her so he was at eye level. "Victoria, you do not lack a wolf. You are not a defect." He pointed to the black vial. "That is the chemical reaction of nightshade ash mixed with refined wolfsbane root. It is an ancient forbidden poison designed to paralyze the spirit of a wolf, keeping it perpetually dormant." Victoria's mind spun. "Poison, but how? A poison that must be administered daily over a span of years to be effective," Maeve added gently. "It is often slipped into a child's food or drink. Over time it barricades the inner wolf in a cage of agony, preventing it from ever surfacing." The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. Lady Beatrice, the sweet herbal tea her stepmother had insisted she drink every single morning for her delicate constitution since she was 5 years old. Beatrice hadn't been caring for her. She had been chemically blinding her inner wolf, ensuring Victoria remained a powerless cripple, so that her own daughter Vivian could claim the Oakhaven inheritance without contest. Tears of absolute fury pricked Victoria's eyes. 21 years of abuse, humiliation, and self-loathing. She had been sold like livestock, all because of a cup of tea. "They robbed me." Victoria choked out a sob, finally tearing through her throat. "They tried," Kevin corrected his large, calloused hand, reaching out to gently wipe a tear from her cheek. "But Oakhaven underestimated you. And they underestimated me. My seers told me a wolf of ancient blinding light was suffering in the southern valleys. A wolf destined to change the fate of our world. I did not buy a slave at that auction, Victoria. I went to rescue an equal." He stood up, looking at Maeve. "Begin the purge." Maeve nodded solemnly. "It will be agonizing, Your Grace. The wolf has been locked away for nearly 2 decades. Waking it up now, it will be like breaking every bone in her body." "I will not leave her side," Kevin promised. The next 3 days were a blur of absolute hell. Victoria was submerged in baths of scalding, medicated mountain water. The withdrawal from the wolfsbane poison tore through her nervous system like wildfire. She screamed until her voice was gone, thrashing violently as decades of unnatural suppression shattered. Through the delirium and the pain, the only constant was him, King Kevin. Whenever she felt she was slipping into the dark abyss of death, his strong hands were there, holding her down, feeding her ice chips, whispering northern prayers of strength in her ear. He grounded her. On the twilight of the 4th day, the fever finally broke. Victoria lay in the massive 4-poster bed in Kevin's own chambers, the only sound the crackling of the hearth. She felt incredibly light. The constant dull ache in her bones that she had lived with her entire life was gone. Slowly she opened her eyes. The room was dim, but she could see everything. She could see the microscopic dust motes dancing in the firelight. She could hear the heartbeats of the guards stationed 3 floors below. She could smell the incoming snowstorm hours before it would hit the mountain. She turned her head. Kevin was sitting in a leather chair near the fire, looking utterly exhausted, the shadows dancing across his scarred face. As she moved, his head snapped up. He froze. Victoria pushed herself up, realizing suddenly that the room was glowing. But the light wasn't coming from the fire. It was coming from her. A faint, ethereal, luminescent white aura rolled off her skin. Kevin slowly stood, his breath catching in his chest. In the ancient texts of the werewolf lore, there were legends of the lunar blessed wolves, not born of the earth, but born directly of the moon goddess's light. They were absolute anomalies, capable of bending elements and healing the unhealable. They were the white wolves. Victoria blinked, and in the reflection of the large silver mirror across the room, she saw her own eyes. They were no longer muddy hazel. They were glowing, brilliant, incandescent silver. "The poison is gone," she whispered, her voice layered with an echoing, powerful resonance that made the glass in the windows vibrate. Kevin, the fearsome beast of the north, slowly dropped to one knee and bowed his head. "Long live the Queen," he murmured. The transition from a broken, poisoned girl to the most powerful shifter in a century was not merely physical. It was a devastating psychological unearthing. In the historical records preserved by Thomas of Monmouth, a real 12th century chronicler who secretly documented the supernatural lineages of Europe, the Lunar Blessed were described not just as wolves, but as walking forces of nature. Victoria was no exception. For the first month in Winterbourne, Victoria did not leave the royal wing. Kevin transformed his own private armoury into a sanctuary for her, padding the stone walls with heavy furs and filling the space with the scent of cedar and roasting meats. He was fiercely protective, refusing to let the general pack overwhelm her, while her senses were so razor-sharp. The first time she shifted, it was not the agonizing, bone-snapping horror that young wolves typically endured. It was fluid, like water turning to ice. Under the light of a full moon, standing on the balcony overlooking the sweeping northern fjords, her human skin seemed to dissolve into blinding, iridescent light. Where a slender girl had stood, a massive, ethereal white wolf now remained. She was taller than Kevin's own dire wolf, her fur shimmering with a pearlescent glow, her silver eyes radiating ancient, terrifying wisdom. Kevin, standing a few feet away, immediately dropped to his knees, baring his throat in the ultimate display of absolute submission. The beast of the north, a warlord who had brought entire empires to their knees, surrendered completely to her. Victoria approached him, her massive paws making no sound on the stone. She nudged his jaw with her snout, a gentle rumbling purr vibrating in her chest. Mine, her inner wolf, whispered a profound realization that echoed through their newly forming bond. They were not just king and queen. They were fated mates, two halves of a primordial soul. Their romance blossomed in the quiet intimacy of the snow-covered peaks. Kevin taught her how to hunt, how to track the scent of a snow hare through a blizzard, and how to harness the earth-shattering howl that could summon a tempest. In return, Victoria brought a profound warmth to the freezing stoic halls of Winterbourne. She healed injured warriors with a mere touch, her glowing hands mending shattered bones and knitting torn flesh in seconds. Word of the white wolf of Winterbourne spread like wildfire along the trade routes. Merchants whispering over tankards of ale spoke of a goddess in the north. But rumours, no matter how beautiful, are dangerous things when they reach the ears of greedy men. Down in the southern valleys, the Oakhaven pack was crumbling. Lord Elijah had squandered the £50 of northern gold Kevin had paid for Victoria on poor investments, lavish feasts, and a failed alliance with Lord Harrington. Winter was approaching, and the southern stores were empty. When the whispers of the Luna Blessed finally reached Lady Beatrice's ears, her blood ran cold. She recognized the description of the silver eyes. She knew immediately that the poison had been purged. "She is a weapon," Lord Harrington sneered, pacing the floors of Oakhaven's great hall. "A weapon that rightfully belongs to the South. Under the old territorial laws established by the Treaty of Windsor, a transaction made under false pretenses is null and void. You sold me a defective runt, Elijah. But Kevin stole a goddess." "We cannot march on Winterbourne," Elijah stammered, terrified of the north. "Kevin's army is impenetrable. He is blinded by affection." Beatrice hissed, her eyes narrowing with vicious calculation. "He is weak to her. We do not need to defeat his army. We only need to demand what is legally ours under the High Council's laws, and if he refuses, we invoke the right of challenge." Driven by desperation, arrogance, and the backing of Harrington's massive rogue army, the Southern forces began their march into the freezing jaws of the North. They believed they were going to reclaim a piece of stolen property. They had no idea they were marching into their own slaughter. The war horns echoed through the jagged peaks of Winterbourne, at dawn a harsh, dissonant sound that shattered the morning tranquility. Victoria stood by the roaring hearth in the grand hall, dressed in a sweeping gown of deep midnight blue velvet, an intricate silver crown resting upon her auburn hair. Beside her stood Kevin, clad in his dark steel armour, his hand resting reassuringly on the pommel of his broadsword. Below, in the massive snowy courtyard, Lord Elijah, Lady Beatrice Vivian, and Lord Harrington stood at the head of a shivering, exhausted southern army. They looked pathetic against the towering obsidian walls of the northern fortress. "King Kevin." Harrington's voice echoed upward, amplified by a magical trinket. "You harbour stolen property. The transaction at Oakhaven was fraudulent. We demand the return of Victoria Redfern to her rightful alpha." Kevin's jaw clenched, a low, murderous growl vibrating in his chest. He moved to step forward, to unleash his dire wolf and tear Harrington's throat out on the snow, but a gentle hand on his chest stopped him. Victoria looked up at her mate, her silver eyes glowing with calm, absolute authority. "They didn't come for the King of the North," she said softly, her voice carrying a dual echoing timbre. "They came for the useless runt. Let them face her." Kevin bowed his head, stepping aside. "Show them my queen." Victoria walked out onto the grand balcony, looking down at the people who had tortured her for 21 years. When Elijah saw her, he gasped, stumbling back. She was no longer the fragile, terrified girl in iron shackles. She radiated an oppressive, suffocating power. "You dare speak of fraud, Lord Harrington?" Victoria's voice boomed across the valley, not yelling, but resonating with the magical amplification of a Luna Blessed. "You who stood by while my own father sold me like a diseased mare. And you, Lord Elijah, who allowed a jealous woman to poison your own flesh and blood for 2 decades. Beatrice paled, her haughty facade crumbling. Vivian shrank behind her mother, whimpering under the crushing weight of Victoria's aura. "I am Victoria, Queen of Winterbourne, the Luna Blessed, and the true heir of the Western Valleys," she declared, her eyes flashing like lightning. "I belong to no one but the goddess and the mate I have chosen. If you wish to claim me, you will have to take me." Harrington, blinded by rage and humiliation, shifted into his massive, scarred brown wolf and charged the gates, howling for his men to follow. They didn't make it past the courtyard centre. Victoria did not even bother shifting. She simply raised her hand. The earth beneath the Southern Army violently trembled. The very snow on the ground defied gravity, swirling upwards to form a suffocating, impenetrable dome of blinding, freezing light around Harrington and the vanguard. With a sharp flick of her wrist, the temperature within the dome dropped to absolute 0. Harrington's wolf froze mid-leap, becoming a permanent, terrifying statue of ice. The rest of the Southern Army dropped their weapons, instantly falling to their knees in absolute, grovelling terror. Elijah fell to his face in the snow, sobbing hysterically. "Victoria, please have mercy, you are my daughter." Elijah wailed, his hands clasped in pathetic supplication. Victoria slowly descended the grand stone staircase, Kevin walking silently, menacingly behind her. She approached her father, looking down at him, with nothing but cold indifference. "Your daughter died on that auction block," she said, her voice devoid of pity. She turned her gaze to Beatrice, who was violently shaking, clutching Vivian. "Lady Beatrice, for the crime of using forbidden wolfsbane on a child of the moon, the High Council dictates the penalty is exile to the dead wastes. You and your spoiled daughter will leave these lands with only the clothes on your backs. If you are ever seen within the borders of the North or the Western Valleys again, my mate will not be as merciful as I am." "No, please!" Beatrice shrieked as northern guards seized her arms, dragging her and a crying Vivian away into the freezing wilderness. Victoria looked back down at Elijah. "As for you, you will return to Oakhaven and strip yourself of your Alpha title. You will live the rest of your miserable days as an Omega, scrubbing the very floors you once made me bleed on. The Southern Territories now belong to the Crown of Winterborn." Elijah wept, nodding frantically, completely broken by the sheer magnitude of his own catastrophic mistake. Victoria turned her back on her past and walked into the strong, awaiting arms of King Kevin. He wrapped his heavy fur mantle around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest. "My beautiful, terrifying queen," Kevin murmured, pressing a deep, passionate kiss to her forehead. She looked up at him, the silver glow in her eyes softening into deep, enduring love. She was no longer useless. She was the most powerful force in the world, and she had finally found exactly where she belonged. What a journey, from a chained, underestimated outcast to the most terrifying and powerful queen the werewolf realm has ever seen. Victoria's story proves that sometimes the people who try to break you are only unlocking your true, hidden potential. If you loved this intense tale of revenge, fated mates, and ultimate justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow drama and romance lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more epic, true-to-life storytelling. See you next time. Thank you.